On Thursday, March 20th, the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce will be hosting its annual State of the City at the Encinitas Community Center from 5:30 to 8. It's a wonderful evening where guests can network and grab some tasty treats from local eateries, but more importantly, attendees will hear an update from the Chamber, visit Encinitas, the 3 Main Street associations, and of course, our mayor. But before we even get to that, we thought it would be a good idea to get to know our new mayor a bit. So I'm excited to welcome to today's Chamber Chat Live podcast, Mayor Bruce Ehlers. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, we have a lot to cover today, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes.
Okay.
But let's talk a little bit about your background for people who don't know how you got into politics and how you got to Encinitas.
Oh, wow. Well, how I got to Encinitas, I moved here 40 years ago for a job. I moved down from L.A. I had a brother that lived down here since 1977, and we kept coming down to visit him. It's like, why do we live in L.A.? And we couldn't afford a house up there, so we decided we would move and relocate to Encinitas, and stopped in Encinitas and haven't looked back. Loved it ever since.
And you're a Midwesterner.
I'm Midwestern, originally from Chicago, in a suburb of Chicago, where my dad was on council for at least 10 years, and on planning commission before that. He even did school board. I won't do that. I'm never going to touch the school board. Don't worry about that. So I guess I have some small town politics in me.
All right. So did that impact your decision to go into politics?
No, I think I got what got me involved was an issue in Olevenheim, 20, almost 28 years ago now, where the city engineer was going rogue and trying to widen Rancho Santa Fe Road to 4 lanes.
Oh my.
And a bunch of people all started gathering. We have that wonderful historic meeting hall. We all met there, and I ended up leading the group to a degree, at least facilitating the meetings, and that became 5 years of going to every council meeting until we fired that city engineer, and that became campaign manager for Maggie Houlihan for all 3 of her victories, and I worked on many other campaigns, and then Prop A and on, and back in Planning Commission, and back get elected, and now mayor.
Oh my goodness!
So well, that's a really quick version.
As you're a Olevenheim neighbor, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For that. I can't imagine that road being 4 lanes.
Yeah.
It's a great transition. So, as a former council member of you were on city council, you were on the planning commission, so you're not new to Encinitas city
not
politics.
At all. Yeah.
And we just talked about it. You're 10 weeks into your first term as mayor. So, how are you feeling about things?
I love it. It's great. Things are happening faster than I had hoped. We have a new city council manager or city manager, and right now we have Jennifer Campbell as the interim city manager. The new council will be appointing hiring a new permanent one, and it may be Jennifer. And then we have our new. My replacement is now on board, Marco San Antonio. So we have all 5 council members in place. And we're about to head into next week a goal-setting session. So we'll have a 2-day goal-setting session at the community center, and out of that, we head towards State of the Union, State of the City address for the chamber, and so things are moving fast. So definitely not. I'm not getting bored. And I'm having a good time.
I imagine not, and thank you for fitting us in today. So not only are you new as mayor, we do have Marco San Antonio, which you mentioned, but Jim O'Hara and Luke Schaefer are new to the council. And you're all sort of finding your way and finding your feet and finding your purpose?
And I may be new, but as you alluded to, and I'll maybe go a little more into that, I've been 2 years on council. Prior to that, I was 5 years on planning commission. The last 2 was chair of the planning commission. And then I was also on planning commission 23 years ago.
You were.
So I've been on planning commission twice. So, and I had the great fortune of working with some of our original planners, and a lot of the people in the planning department, they were associate planners and interns like back in that time frame. So I kind of came up with them and learned the code at the same time from the same people. So I've got a very good grounding. And in the middle there, between the two planning commission sessions, I wrote Prop A. We got it passed. We defeated Measure T, which was an attempt to upzone the city. Measure U, to attempt to upzone the city. We defeated the city when they sued us over Prop A. So it's not like I was idle in the gap there. So I've got a good 20 years experience with planning issues in the city of Encinitas, and quite frankly, with most of the issues, there haven't been a lot of new issues I've run into as mayor or as council member.
All right, so talking about this experience in Encinitas, what do you feel, looking at over the past couple decades, it's a two-part question, the accomplishments of the city of Encinitas, and what are some outstanding things that you feel really good about the city?
Oh boy, you mean as far as prior to me being on council?
No,
or
just as being on council.
Being on council, I think we're getting back on track. So one of the things I have always admired in the city is I thought we currently have a very good general plan. It really does encapsulate the wishes of people that live here, have come here to live, that lived here before. If you go read the general plan cover to cover, it's aged well. And there's been a lot of talk in recent years, probably the last two mayoral administrations, that want to evolve it and change it. And in running for mayor, and same thing running for council, but in running for mayor in particular, I walked citywide. I knocked on doors, and I find that is the best way to learn what people want. And I've done it for 25 years because I was campaign manager for Maggie Houlihan and several others. In doing that, you really learn what people think, because they won't answer the door unless they want to talk, and they'll talk to you, and you'll get 10 to 20% of the doors you knock on, they'll answer and they'll talk. I've found that what's in the general plan, even during this election, that it's still true today. People want that small beach town scale. They want it walkable. They want it bikeable, but they also want the traffic to move. Right. And they want to maintain the clean coastal environment. And that really encapsulates, for me, the vision that I'm driving for. It's also the vision that the original founders of the city were driving for. I've had this long history of working with the original planners, one of the original planning commissioners, quite a few of the early council members. And so I'm continuing that. I keep telling people what I'm doing is it's almost back to the future. We're the good parts of the past we want to keep propagating. The state overreach is probably my number one. They're usurping our local zoning control is probably the main battle that I need to go do, and that's not a thing we can do just within our city council. We have to work with many other cities, many other mayors to go do that, and Sandag and state government to reform that and get back on track.
Right. All right. So I have some questions about the general plan, some things I want to touch on that you already mentioned. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges of Encinitas. Are there a long list of, a dozen, 24 challenges, or are there like three that really are at the top of your list
there are
that
three,
you really think, okay, we can do this?
Absolutely 3 to 5 that are at the top of my list, and I'll start with the big three. The big three are local control of our land use ordinances, and that's the state over control. And you heard me say during the campaign, local control, not Sacramento control, and I think that kind of sums that up. The second one is homelessness. We have to reduce homelessness. Now, we have our current sheriff, our captain, who's new in the last year, is great. He is enforcing our laws. We've had some advantages that have come about. The overwhelming support for Prop 36. Prop 36 reverses some of the old 2014 Prop 47 drug reforms and now puts back in some of the better laws that give judges a little more clout in getting people to reform.
All right. So in layman's terms, if people aren't familiar with Prop 36,
it basically,
what's the down low on that?
Yeah, the down low is they decriminalize so much of the drugs that back in Prop 47, 2014, that the sheriffs and the prosecutors were unable to enforce any treatment on the people. The people would voluntarily leave the treatment and they didn't have any ramification. Prop 36 will allow judges to say you either go to jail or get treatment, and hopefully we can, get people to take the treatment,
right,
have a positive effect, and get them out of the drug habits, the abuse.
Right.
And we could talk for an hour about homelessness, that is.
But things, and we do get calls at the chamber. I actually had someone from Canada call just this week asking about the homeless. What is our homeless problem in Encinitas? And as a tourist, is she going to come across homeless? I think she had been reading about Southern California homelessness or unhoused. But I know with the sheriff and the Hope team, Stephen Gonzalez, and the facility in Vista, it seems like we are addressing it as best we can.
We are addressing those people that are willing to take treatment. And so the problem is, if you read the literature on homelessness, about 2/3 of the people are homeless due to either a psychosis, diagnosed or undiagnosed, and then a drug substance abuse disorder, or a combination of both. Typically a combination of both, and typically one leads to the other or vice versa. We've got those people. Most of those 2/3 of the homeless, and then the remaining homeless are sober, juveniles, battered women, sober veterans, families temporarily displaced due to financial issues. And that 1/3 accepts the public-private treatment options that they have. Now, with the 2/3 that have either and or drugs and or psychosis, they typically say no. So they're refusing treatment. So they're not going to take advantage of the Buena Creek Navigation Center. They're not going to take advantage of Steve Gonzalez, who's our outreach manager at the city. So that's why you need a little bit of a carrot and a little bit of a stick, and you need a judge when they're breaking the law. And I always say homelessness is not a crime.
Right.
But defecating in public, incapacitated in public, being a danger to yourself or threatening others, those are all crimes. And we need to, petty theft is a crime. We need to enforce those. And that's where our current Captain Watts, our current captain, is wonderful. I got to go on I've gone on a ride-along. I also went on a walk-along. And he's got a program where he's taking several deputies and touring downtown.
Almost every morning, right?
I see him down there multiple times, even since I did it. And it was wonderful. I think of the day I went, it may have been a big entourage, but it was like 7 of us, and going to each step in, talk to patrons, talk to the business owner, all the way from La Paloma down to Swami's and back. One side, down back the other. And I think it's a great program. It shows that they're keeping in touch. And we heard who was having problems, who's saying it's getting better. And I'll be down there with them multiple times. Yeah. So
no, I think they're doing a good job. We actually had them step into and give a little summary of what they're doing and tools for businesses. We had them come to a coffee connection down at the Lumberyard at Joseph's at Broad Street Doco. So to come and let businesses know what they can do and what resources is in there and what they can't do. So I think some plans are in place for sure. In a positive direction.
So homeless, and so the third one would be basic infrastructure. And you heard me always say basic infrastructure first. I think we've had and I like to look at capital improvements over 10-year segments. And if I look at the last 10 years, we didn't put any extra money into our pavement. We did put minimal amount of money, $250,000 a year, into refurbishing our storm drains, which are 50 to 60 years old, typically corrugated metal and rusting. and we didn't put significant money into Leucadia flooding, solving Leucadia flooding. And that's an area I've spent the last 2 years really learning, reading all the hydrology reports. Fun. I don't have trouble sleeping.
Your engineer background comes into play there.
But I can read those kind of reports, and I've talked to the experts. I've talked to the engineer that designed the 100-year solution, the blueprint I like to call it. And I've been out there. I was out there midnight after the rainstorm last week.
Oh, you were?
Oh,
okay.
You have to see where the water flows and where it pools.
Right.
And so I drove, and it was midnight, so there was no traffic. So I'm pulling over and shining flashlights into.
Get your camera out, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I have lots of camera pictures of all that. But from that, I learned what we should be doing, and I think our current and quite frankly, the week before, because the rain was coming, I had met with Public Works, City Manager, Engineering out at the undercrossing, El Porto undercrossing, to talk about what pumps we were going to have in place in case we got a atmospheric river. And I checked the night. The pumps were there where they belong, and we're working on mitigations that will protect us until we can get all the pipes in the ground. And so when I talk about basic infrastructure, I always like to list out what I'm talking about so I'm very clear. Basic infrastructure that I think we haven't been spending money on in the last 10 years at the rate we should. Pavement. We just use the transit funding, no augmentation from our general fund. Number two is the refurbishment of the storm drains that are collapsing literally. And it costs twice as much to fix a collapsed one as reline a regular one. And the duration, the life expectancy is the same whether you reline or whether you replace. Third one is Leucadia flooding, and finally coming up and implementing the solution. And that's not going to be a one-year thing. That's going to be $5 million a year for 10 years. So it's about a $50 million problem. At-grade crossings in Leucadia, the two we have planned, I consider that basic infrastructure. Right now, we don't allow people to, technically they're not legally allowed to cross. We need to make it safe. We need to make it legal. Quiet zone. But until you sit down there and try and have a conversation over coffee in Leucadia or even downtown, and it comes blasting right through there. They literally the neighbors call it the blast zone, and it affects thousands and so that's a basic infrastructure thing. And then the last part of basic infrastructure in my mind, of course, is public safety. And in public safety enforcement, I think we haven't increased, other than 2 sheriffs last year for the HOPE team. We haven't increased our traffic enforcement in at least 10 years. I checked the records. So I think that's an area. And then a more topical one is the basic infrastructure would include making sure we have wildfire readiness for everybody, especially from Alivenine into New Encinitas, because that's where the highest threat's coming from. So next week on the agenda, I did a council-initiated item from me, and it will be having our Public Safety Commission look at and evaluate our readiness for a major conflagration, much like the Palisades fire. It was interesting. I don't think it's anything new because I was going through YouTube late at night, and there is a movie from 1962 produced by the LA Fire Department about the Brentwood and Bel Air conflagration of 1962. And when you watch this half-hour movie, it is exactly what happened in the Palisades. They talked about the water running out at the upper elevations. They had a graphic explaining it. And so my point to the Public Health and Safety Commission is this is what I really need you looking at. I'm going to give them something good and meaty to do. I need their evaluation and staff's response to say these are the types of things to do by April so that we can get it into the budget. So those are the basic information. I think I got 3 there, and I could keep going with the next lesser, but that's where I'm focusing in these first few months.
Yeah, and going back to your final point, we've lived here long enough. We've all evacuated, right? And then, so I'm thinking I'm ready. But after Pacific Palisades, I'm not. And people are like, what are you doing this weekend? I said, I'm going to get myself ready for a natural disaster. Because you think you are, but you're really not.
And that's why the Public Health and Safety Commission can be a very good tool.
Yeah.
And we just appointed 2 new members, and I've talked to the chair, and they're ready. And it was interesting when we formed the Public Health and Safety Commission. I was lone man out on that, lone person out, in that I wanted to delegate specific authority to them, and the rest of the councils, led by the mayor, said, no, they're smart people, let them do it. And I think they've been found, not waffling, what's the word? I don't think they've had the direction. So I'm going to look for the new council to give cleaner direction to every one of the commissions.
Right.
I think all the commissions need to go back to the general plan. And so one of my ideas, and one of the things obviously I'm 1 vote out of 5, but I'd like to lead by showing everybody our general plan is broken down in elements. There's a public safety element. Okay, that should be the purview of the Public Safety Commission.
Right.
You got a planning commission that really the land use and the housing element, and they're all part of the general plan. There's resource management, Parks and Rec. It really talks about parks, and who might fit traffic is the circulation element. The only one that doesn't have an element of the commissions is environmental, and I think long-term we need to get an environmental element that has the goals and policies. Right now they're kind of dispersed through the rest, but we should collect them all in one place, and then all of our environmental commission would have that purview.
All right, that feeds me into my environmental question that I have for you.
Okay.
All right, so we're known for our natural beauty. I sit on the Chamber's Environmental Sustainability Committee and work quite closely with the city. We work quite closely with the Green Business Initiative. We've been working with Crystal and her team there, and also the plastic bags and the waste and all that kind of stuff.
The smoking.
So the smoking.
Yep.
So are there additional steps that we can take as a community coming down from the Environmental Commission or from City Council that would help preserve our natural beauty?
Well, I think that's a broad question. So we can talk about greenhouse gas and reducing greenhouse gases, and what I'm a firm believer that we have to use the marketplace to do that. And we're seeing electric vehicles and we're seeing telecommuting as 2 of the main reasons. In fact, I was in a SANDAG meeting today. SANDAG obviously has quite a few climate action criteria in our regional plan we're working on. And the statement out of them is we have to meet a 19% reduction in greenhouse gas production, but we're not allowed to count electric vehicles. And literally the words were, we would easily meet our current goal if we could count electric vehicles. Not many people have heard this.
Yeah.
This is the second time I've heard this at the SANDAG meeting. And so this is
Begs the question, why?
Yeah, and I haven't gotten to that, but I will.
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that what we've been doing is decarbonizing through electric cars, hydrogen cars. I also think we'll see more. I think we'll see more hydrogen trucks because they just, from a weight thrust ratio, it works. But they're all part of the solution. And more solar. I always like to ask people, how many city buildings have solar on top, do you think?
I don't know. City Hall?
1. When was it done?
Oh, I have no idea.
Pre-2011.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's coming up for renewal.
Wow.
So I would question, so the economics of replacing power with solar typically pays off 6-7 years, right? That we would be saving the capital that we invest in each one of the buildings. So since 2011, we could have done, with an equivalent amount of capital, we could have done a building, gotten it paid back, taken that paid back capital, put it in another. By the way, the first building is saving money the whole time now since. And then we could have taken that same capital. So one of the things that I would like to push for in the climate action plan, and I've talked to Crystal about this, is that I'd like to see a much more quantitative approach. How many equivalent metric tons of carbon are we saving with each one per dollar? And so we need to be more efficient.
Right.
And when I went through the climate action plan, the current one, which is a good first start, I'm critical of it, but only in a loving way. And I want to make it really work.
Right.
And we had, I want to say 21 or 22 goals, and the way we were claiming our progress is first time I remember reviewing it, probably on Planning Commission, we'd completed 7 out of 21. Well, they were the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And how many, the question I have is how many metric tons did we save equivalent of CO2, and how much did it cost? And so you'll see me push that onto the Environmental Commission and the department.
Right.
From a policy standpoint, we'll say, hey, we need to get more quantitative.
Right. Right.
So,
right.
And then you talked about natural beauty and resources. One of the things that I plan to continue with Deputy Mayor Joey Lyons is the native plant ordinance. And just right off the bat, this does not require people in single-family homes to do anything different than what they do today. My real push is on dedicated open space that is mandatory under our current zoning laws. Public-owned space, we should be taking advantage of native plants because, one, they're far more resilient. They take almost no water, if not none. And so public spaces, roadways, there are quite a few places where we could be putting in California, local Southern California natives, saving water, reducing maintenance. And part of the problem is that our landscape maintenance companies aren't set up to take care of natives. So we're going to do it by a little bit. So we're doing a demonstration.
This makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we're doing a demonstration portion of Leucadia oaks, which will help us get our contractors in tune with how to take care of them. And will also be an experiment on a small scale that'll let us see how much we can actually maybe even reduce the amount of maintenance later. It's ironic because it, like Sun Vista, which is near our houses, we live near each other, but Leucadia Oaks was supposed to be all native oaks and native plants around the outside, but back 20-some years ago when it got built by the then Parks and Rec Department, they put in ornamentals all around the edge with oaks. So we've got some beautiful native oaks with this ornamental stuff underneath. So on one little corner there, we're gonna do an experiment and a pilot program is probably a better way to say it. And then my personal goal, one of the members of the citizen team that's helping push this started me on something where I say he said 1 park a year. That's all I ask. So we'll get there. And as we learn, we'll get better. And I think you're going to naturally see the contractors, our big contractors, will develop a capability, and part of their business will be caring for native plant areas. So, and I can keep going.
Okay. And then, so when you come in as a business, because we were talking about this on the green business certification too, if it was part of that initial permitting to say, hey, from the get-go, there's incentives, there's, why not just start instead of retrofitting everything? Why not make that part of the planning process? So it seems, and it could be the same thing with native plants, right?
That's what we are doing is codifying what is currently the practice. So when I was on Planning Commission, and when I got onto Planning Commission the most recent time, the second time, they were already putting in place a requirement for native plants as being a proportion. I think it was 50%. It may have been 25 at the time. It became 25% local Southern California native. And that is a standard condition on any new development right now that's being applied. What we're now doing is making sure the code lines up with that. And we're going a step further and making the code apply to the city itself especially. And we still haven't finished writing it. And I should talk about the mature tree ordinance that was coming to council. And I got quite a bit of feedback from the commercial owners and the large multifamily apartment building owners that they were unaware of it and wanted to give input. And so we actually it had gone to the Planning Commission in early draft form in a joint Planning Commission. I want to say UFAC, the Urban Forestry Advisory Committee. They had a joint meeting, and it had never gone back. Went through staff, and was coming straight to Planning Commission. So we turned it around and said, no, we're going to take it off the calendar. It went through Planning Commission, I think, last night, and it's open for comment right now, and it will be coming back. So any commercial owners that have large trees that it's usually in the right of way, or if you're doing a new development where we'd go through the planning process, that's where it would kick in. But they'll want to get familiar with the mature tree ordinance that is coming but not done.
That's a good tip, you commercial owners. All right, so you touched a little bit on transportation. So obviously traffic is an issue almost everywhere in Encinitas, sometimes more than others, sometimes it's due to something under construction, or it's just tourist day-to-day business. So has there been any discussion about microtransit? Because I would love to see like a shuttle like PB has, Pacific Beach has, that runs, and it's an electric shuttle that runs from Leucadia all the way down to Cardiff and back, and maybe a little bit up to El Camino Real. So has there been at the city level some discussion on microtransit?
So as we talked about earlier, this is week 10, I think.
That's true. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So and the big issues are the ones that
microtransit is down on your number 25. Is that what you're saying?
Interesting. So I took on being the rep to Sandag, which is typical for the mayor. And that's where the microtransit discussion is occurring and should occur.
Okay.
So we are in the midst, Sandag, and not the city of Encinitas, is in the midst of updating their regional plan. They do it every 4 years. This one will be the 2025 regional plan. And there's a portion of that, it's called the Regional Transportation Infrastructure Plan, RTIP. And I forget what the I is. And that microtransit is included in there. And the state of microtransit in the county of San Diego right now is there are quite a few pilot programs. And they're mostly by city. Some are by city, some are by county regions, subregions. There's one by NTCD, North County Transit District, that is a pilot program. And as I started thinking about this in these meetings, is microtransit is part of that bigger network. And I don't know about you, but I tend to count the number of people I see in each bus going by me. I never get beyond one hand, which is just ridiculous, that we're driving these huge buses. So should the microtransit be an individual city-by-city add-on, tack on to this, where each city, or should it be part of the overall network?
Right.
And quite frankly, I believe there are quite a few bus routes that could be replaced with microtransit, microbuses, electric microbuses.
Right.
But this should all be budgeted, financed, and done as one network to optimizing travel time. So when we talk about microtransit in buses in particular, or small buses, I think that's a bigger question for Sandag and coordination. And the other reason I would say that, I lived in New Encinitas, and I would want to go to South Carlsbad. Well, an Encinitas microtransit wouldn't go there. So we're artificially putting blocks where a NCTD based, which is North County, would look at that and go, hey, traffic wants to go there to there, I'm going to do it. And quite frankly, the inverse is probably more true. There are quite a few people in South Carlsbad that shop in Encinitas, which we want more of them coming from the chamber. So that's my opinion right now. I haven't looked at it though.
Yeah, because we had someone on from Sandag, and it's really the first mile, last mile, right? So that bus can only take you so far. How do you get, get that last mile, or you get to the bus stop? And because we are on the coaster, there's some opportunities there. We don't have to get into a whole transit discussion, but I wanted to throw that out there.
And I wanted to point out the first mile, last mile framework assumes the bus is invariant, and it has to be going from this point A to point B.
You're thinking.
And so we had an old former mayor that used to say, trains go from where you aren't to where you don't want to be, or where you don't want to go. And it's you call it first mile, last mile, but I'm taking the bigger picture, and we need a transit system. Obviously trains are fixed. Buses aren't fixed. Microbuses can go further. I think we can then tailor And you also want a transit system that can ebb and flow with demand.
With demand.
And microbuses replacing major buses in North County. San Diego's probably different. But in North County, we probably have a much more tailored solution that would serve us better and more efficiently.
Right.
And we could go on and talk about transit. One of the mayors that's been on Sandeck this morning was mentioning a 25-year-old analysis. I don't know if we've redone it or not. I just learned about it today. That showed that some of the routes back then were subsidized at $50 and $60 a trip. And some of the rural ones. We need the same kind of analysis done here.
Right.
So
okay.
We're going to get to that. You're down in the 5, 6, 7, 8 priority.
Right.
But it's all, hey, my job and our job out there as council members is to work at all those levels and not forget any of them.
Right.
But obviously the first focus, first 10 weeks, homelessness and local control and basic infrastructure.
Okay. I'm going to put my chamber hat on for a minute here. Economic development, obviously very broad, and you talked about your strategy meetings coming up on Monday and Tuesday, and economic development is obviously part of that meeting. So as, looking out for the small businesses and businesses in general in Encinitas and North County, are there things that you're doing to entice businesses to come to Encinitas, keep businesses in Encinitas?
Again, week 10. But as a council member, I felt strongly that the parking downtown, so we have a couple of forces going on. We are a car society. We'll decarbonize through electric, as we mentioned. And you still need to park cars, whether they're rented, whether they're electric or gas, right? Or even hydrogen. And people are, it's an interesting, I have a study about car ownership and mass transit ridership. It's from Southern California area government, which is LA, Orange County, the equivalent of Sandeck. So it's a big demographic. It was run from 2000 to 2015, so it's not too old. And it showed that the mass transit ridership was steadily declining the whole time. And then you hit COVID after that, and it dropped worse.
Right.
And they peeled the onion and said, why? And it turned out that they found that within that large area, which has our demographic well represented there too, the same type of Southern California. And they found the car ownership went from 1.7 cars per household in 2000 to 2.4. That's about a 50% increase in number of cars per household. And so we will need to handle cars now more. In fact, I have examples when we were doing a parking permit program where we had 40-year-old apartment complexes saying, hey, we need to park over there too because we're underparked. A 40-year-old apartment complex is underparked. That just supports what I just said. Right. Here in Encinitas too. And so I don't believe we're going to see less cars on the road. I think we're adding density. The state is forcing us to add density. We're adding, we as owners are adding more cars per household. The density of cars per square mile is going up, not down. We are not going to force people out of their cars into mass transit. I just don't see that happening in Encinitas, especially with an aging population of Boots. So we have to be pragmatic, and I'm pragmatic. And so parking is one of the areas to support local business. And so I've been opposing that for a while. In this election, or the 10 weeks as mayor, I haven't talked about that. Quite frankly, that's going to be a discussion for the 5 council members, and I will bring it up. 5 council members as we work on our objectives for the city for the next year. And not reducing parking is one of my objectives. Now, again, the state overreach we talked about, not only are they taking away our land use controls, included in that is reducing parking requirements. And they've done that through a multitude of ways. But we've also, with my objection, because I voted no on it, Planning Commission, we've actually voluntarily reduced parking requirements on senior facilities. And I always said, my first question at that meeting was, what's a senior? Well, it turned out we had four definitions, 55 and older, 60, 62, and 65. 55-year-olds have high schoolers at home typically,
Right,
and they still
right.
have plenty of cars.
Right.
60 and 62 are still working.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
at the
yep.
time, I think I had 3 or 4 cars. At home. And then 65-year-olds, and I'll skip the 65 and go to the 80 and 90
Right.
and older. They have caretakers.
Yeah.
And so this idea that somehow just because you're a senior, you don't have a car
Right.
is ludicrous.
Right.
But it's a convenient excuse to reduce requirements on developers.
Right. Got it.
And I oppose that.
Okay.
So
And briefly on the El Camino Real corridor
specific
plan,
Yeah.
is that moving forward? Is it being relooked at? Is it
Well, it's done.
Done?
It's done, but it's a shadow of its former self. That's an interesting case, and that's one. I was a planning commissioner, and I went to one of the first meetings as a planning commissioner. I got taken off the planning commission, so I went as a private citizen. I think I'm the only person in the room who missed only one meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Mosca used to be the guy running it,
Yep.
and then it became Tony after he
Right.
stepped down or didn't run again, and it didn't step over to me, which maybe it should have because it was mostly in
Right, right.
D4.
Yeah.
But what happened was it had housing included in it initially, and I was opposed. I was going to every meeting. I'd raise my hand, and the first meeting they were putting up to 8,000 houses on the corridor. We only have 25,000 houses in all of Encinitas. It was a 31% increase in our population potential, all concentrated on one corridor. It would have done nothing but gridlock along
Right.
there.
Right.
But they put the schedule up there, timeline, this little wavy timeline, no Prop A vote. So I raised my hand. And, need a Prop A vote. And
yeah.
sure enough,
Right.
next time they did.
Right.
And then I'm talking about the housing, and they came to the conclusion, and we had meetings all through 2022, and I'm going there as a private citizen, and then we had, I think there was one joint meeting in the middle of 2023, but no pure subcommittee meeting. All 23, it just went dormant right after I got elected. For whatever reason. And we had our first meeting in 2024, subcommittee meeting. Tony had replaced Joe. Somehow, without any action, I'd gotten put on there. Nobody ever notified
Right,
me.
right.
I went as a private citizen, but I ended up at the bench. And they had taken all the housing out. And it was a complete surprise. So what was envisioned for the El Camino Real corridor was more streetscape, more boulevard, more walkability, better protected bike lanes. What came out of the end was, and potential to put housing in there, a lot more than I was comfortable with and that would have ever approved. What came out of the other end was no housing, don't move the concrete curbs at all, try and see if we can get any land from the developers that, or at least enforce certain boulevards. But there were sections like and they took out the mobile home parks, so they're not being part of this anymore. They took out all of the Ecke Ranch, Target Center, and that.
Right, that's right.
So and Home Depot was already out of it. So the northern third was just the right of way of the road, just a little stick up there. So there's no widening and beautification of the
Right.
boulevard. In fact, I had them check and see where the property line was. It's right at the edge of the sidewalk. So the current sidewalk on the west side in front of the Ecke Ranch commercial area, that's the same. We're so constrained, there's really no changes. So it's really a shadow of its former self. We put some controls in there and some help, but it really was minimal. So I didn't oppose it. I actually voted for it at that point.
I asked because we have Coffee on the Camino, and I think you spoke at one of our meetings.
I did.
Where we're trying to give those businesses along the El Camino Real corridor a voice and feel a little bit more unified. So
I think there's one more thing that I should fill in about state law and housing.
Okay.
So I said there's no housing, but in the meantime, the state passed a law called AB 2011, and there are two laws, SB 6, that gives many of those property owners by right ability to put R30 housing in addition to the commercial. So that's one way we may end up with housing there. Now, it requires a livable wage, and that has a general effect of doubling the cost of the development. So that's going to slow it down a bit if somebody chooses to go there.
Well, there's one right on near Armstrong Garden, housing that got approved right there.
That was actually a R30 overlay zone as part of the housing element. So that came through as rezoned to residential.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to ask you to top line this, and it's a hot topic.
Yeah. Which one?
Housing.
Top line.
Like the affordable housing, I mean, it always seems to be a very polarizing topic.
It absolutely is. Well, it's not the affordable housing that's polarizing. Interestingly enough, most people in Encinitas understand the need, but they don't want to give up all of our community character for it. And that gets into, we have a thing called the inclusionary requirement. So any housing development that goes in, they put in 100 houses, at least 15 and sometimes 20 out of the 100 have to be low-income units. Okay, deed restricted low-income units, many of them in perpetuity. So it's not like it's just temporary, even some are temporary depending on which program they use. But the majority are going to be deed restricted forever. And people are okay with that, and they understand that. What's happening, though, is all these new laws that came out of the Housing Accountability Act of 2017 and California Density Bonus Law, it gives all sorts of waivers to our development standards. So it's almost as though our zoning doesn't count.
Matter, yeah.
Yeah, and so the top line, I guess, from the voters' viewpoint, is they see these tall, huge projects go in, and then the state's gone even a step further, and this came up a week ago at the Quail Meadows Apartments approval, is that we have what's called a certified housing element for that has these subzones in it, and if we don't follow all the guidelines in there, the state Housing and Community Development has threatened us very credibly, very obviously, that they will decertify our housing element, and they've done this. They just did it to the city of Portola. They just, without warning, said, you're decertified. Well, when that happens, builders, like the builders with the applications, like the Quail Meadows, they could immediately ask for builder's remedy. You'll hear builder's remedy. And we don't want that to trigger, because not only would the project that we maybe denied suddenly have grounds to build exactly that project, they can build a worse project, and 10 others could come in with them at the same time and claim builder's remedy because you have a decent. So it is, I called it the nuclear option. It's really, we had a choice. We had a choice between total world annihilation, where anybody and everybody, or letting the one project go. So when we passed it, we approved it, basically denied the appeal, but we approved it under duress with a statement, and this is why we have to play at the state level and at the initiative level and at the SANDAG level, and we just keep having to do everything we can and work hard, lobby I just met with our city lobbyist to make sure he understands housing is the number one lobby issue for our city. So.
All right, you have your work cut out for you.
I am.
So
724.
Yeah. So tell me, what are you excited about? What gets you excited?
Oh, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love Encinitas. I think we all love Encinitas. Everybody here, both the pro housing and the pro affordable housing, and myself, we all love living here, and we all want. I found substantially the same thing. When I go knock on doors, most everybody is in the middle. I'm an NPP. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an NPP. But when I knocked on doors, I would get I would lead with that, and I would get, I'm a Republican, but I'm socially, I want to help the homeless, and I hear that all the time. And I hear, I'm a Democrat, but I'm fiscally conservative, or I'm an NPP, and my thought is 85% of the people in the town are that way, and they love why we live here. They want to be human and help, and I'll use the homeless as an example. I've reached out and I tracked probably not quite 10, probably 8 or 9 individual hardcore cases, because I learned a lot by tracking them over the last 2 years. I've talked to one case, her mother. I've talked to the sister of another, and it's good because you really understand. And I've talked to neighbors too that want to complain, but they all feed them too, and they care about them. And I told the mother of one of our homeless who's now in jail for burglary, but I told her, at least she landed in a place with a heart, and she's not, the hard streets of Encinitas, and we do need to clean it up because we need to make it so that all our citizens have access to our parks, to our sidewalks, to our and that we stop the illegal activity associated with homelessness. But at the same time, every one of the people I talk to, they literally give food to many of these people because they care, and that's wonderful.
I always say that Encinitas is we're kind people. I mean, we work the street fairs or we have Oktoberfest or whatever. I mean, I'm out and about in the community all the time.
Almost more than I am.
Right. And so I'm like, we're just kind folk. We're friendly folk, and I really enjoy our community. I've taken up a lot of your time. State of the City is coming up on March 20th.
Yep.
Do you want to give me a sneak peek? What are you going to be?
Sneak peek is a lot of what we talked about today. It's going to be as much as anything. As I said, that'll be probably week 12 or 13.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really more the vision of where we're going.
Okay.
And the vision is no different than the campaign brochures, and I'll be checking it off right down there. Probably a few more examples, a little more detail here and there, and a lot of pictures. But I'm looking forward to it. And also a little change this year. We will, because this law changes, we'll be repeating it at City Hall, at least my portion,
right.
So that anybody can get to it and see it. But the Chamber's having a big event, and we're glad to be there supporting the Chamber, as always.
Yes, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
The Encinitas State of the City is March 20th from 5:30 to 8 at the Encinitas Community Center. We will be hearing from Mayor Ehlers as well as the Chamber. Visit Encinitas, get a little tourism update, and the 101s, and an opportunity to network with our new city council members.
Yep.
And community leaders, influencers. It really is a fun night. More information, go to EncinitasChamber.com.